In Norway, there is a shelter that is under the one of the bigger mountains where we have seeds given from every country where it's frozen and kept for future generations. Tomorrow, if there is some catastrophe, that could be the only place where we have access to the seeds. Biodiversity broadly refers to the diverse kinds of living things that are there in a given area. For example, having a thali and you have a mix of different types of food. The diversity in the Indian thali is something where it gives a very easy understanding of what diversity is. Earth is right now somewhere close to the tipping point, and we don't know when it's going to sort of draw the analogy overflow, but the temperature is increasing. Biodiversity broadly refers to the diverse kinds of living things that are there in a given area. For example, having a thali and you have a mix of different types of food. The diversity in the Indian thali is something where it gives a very easy understanding of what diversity is. You have a mix of things that come from various regions of the country. Think of life also in the similar way. If you look at a small patch of land and you say, what is the life there? It's not just the birds, it's not just the animals, it's not just the trees that are there. We're also referring to the microorganisms that are there in the soil at that point of time, the fungi that is there. So all the life that is given, that you can see in a particular, or not even see, present in a given patch of land, we refer that to as the biodiversity of that land. And why is this important is, I think we keep forgetting, humans being who we are, that we are one of the many species that are there on this world. And we've not even mapped all the species. So in the million species, if we were to think of us as a part of the ecosystem on the earth, then we are living along with all of these living beings. And so it's very important to understand that being a part of that, how do we give back and what do we take from them and how much do we take from the rest of the life? So biodiversity sort of studies what is this mix that is given in a patch of land. And here I want to just share a small hypothesis. It sounds very scientific, but it's very simple to understand. This image that you're seeing is a close-up of a flight. And all of us have been in the flights, we've seen, or even in the buses. This is a picture of an aircraft, but it could be anything else. It is held together by these rivets. So these rivets are like these little screws that are holding up the metal together. Now, Dr. Paul Ehrlich, who is a scientist, he's written a hypothesis. It's called rivet popper hypothesis. What this broadly says is, imagine that you're flying in this flight. Okay, you're moving from one city to another, you've boarded the flight, and the flight is taken off, you're flying now, and each one of these rivets is coming off, or it's falling apart. Okay. Now, one rivet comes off, the flight will be intact. A handful of rivets are coming off, even then the flight will continue on its path. But imagine you will reach a certain point where a particular rivet will sort of undo the whole flight, and then you're going to have a free fall, right? So similarly, if you were to think of Earth as an ecosystem and all these rivets are different species that are there, we are losing species. And when I say species, I'm referring to the technical term that our scientists use for each life form. Each life form has a particular name. We are called Homo sapiens. In the similar way, we have a name for every life form that we've identified on Earth so far. There are many more unknown. But imagine each species is falling off, meaning that disappearing from the face of Earth. A few species are lost, nothing is going to happen. Our life on Earth will continue. Earth will continue to be as it is, or will thrive rather without us. But at some point, some species, when they're lost, the whole thing will come undone. And this is what the scientists have been alerting us to, that the biodiversity of a given area, we're losing out species every hour, every day, every year, continuously. And we'll reach a tipping point when some species disappear, and along with that, the balance on the earth will be gone. So this hypothesis sort of is giving us a story that it's called the rivet popper hypothesis. We lose few species, we lose life, and we lose the balance on earth. So when I'm talking about species, we always keep hearing about Save the Tiger or the polar bear on the Arctic circles. These are the images that come to us as soon as we think of conservation or life that is being saved, other than human beings, of course. So some of these species are called keystone species, and what this means is that that particular species has much more impact on the life and the ecosystem around it as compared to the rest of the species. And the most famous one, popular one that we keep hearing about is the tiger. So let's say if a tiger perishes, then the animals that it eats, the herbivores, will also be multiple in number, and they will come and hit our grasslands or eat much more than the population would increase. So it sort of disturbs the balance of the life, and hence they're called keystone species. Now we're losing these also at a very rapid rate. So you can imagine the imbalance that will be caused in the ecosystem. Now, this is a note, I didn't mean to put up the whole thing, but just to show you that humans, we as a species, referred to as hyper keystone species. What this means is that we have a much, much higher impact on the ecosystem around us. And we're very immune to this knowledge because we take it for granted. From when we are born to what we are doing on a daily basis, it is a set path. It's like a rail track, right? We continue our motions, we go along because someone has set it and there was never any problem before. And we continue to believe that there will be no problem in the future. And we sort of behave the way we do. I don't need to enlist all of those. But we have such a big impact on the rest of the species in the ecosystem that we are referred to as a hyper keystone species. So I just want to step back and look at ourselves for a minute. Just think of this, okay? If you see the circle, but the point where you see this 4, 5, 6, 7.3 million years ago, but this is where it started. So I'm not even counting the numbers, but these many million years ago is when humans think Earth started. Now you look at the timeline that has passed since from then on, and you come to this extreme end. Okay, this is where human beings came. So if you were to compare the timeline from when Earth started, and you think it's 124-hour day, then we came in maybe at 11:45 p.m. So that's how young a species we are if you compare ourselves to from when Earth has evolved. And in that little time, now we are causing so much of havoc as a species that we are destroying what has been a part of the Earth for so long, the life, the ecosystem around us. So this chart sort of enlists how relatively a new species we are in terms of existence, but causing so much havoc. But in this whole circle of time that Earth has existed, what scientists tell us is that there have been big 5 mass extinctions so far. Again, I'm not going into the technicalities, but just to get a feel, these are like millions of years ago, right? And the most famous one that we know is the famous stories that we keep hearing about dinosaurs disappearing. That's the last mass extinction we had. So what happened in these mass extinctions is that a majority of the species got wiped out. So it's a very natural process for Earth to go through this. Scientists have sort of enlisted how often this has happened. And they say that from when Earth has evolved 5 times, 90% of the species or 70% of the species got wiped out. But now what is happening is, since man has started, or human beings have started to behave the way they're behaving now, which is again the consumerism, and after the industrialization has started, what is happening is we're seeing a huge spike in the number of species that we're losing. So if you look at the timeline and the graph, from 1800 to 1900 onwards, you suddenly see this spike. This is what the scientists are saying, that we're losing species. And the reason for this uptick is our industrialization. Okay, when humans started farming, they moved away from being hunters and gatherers to settling down in village and started agriculture. There was not so much of an issue. But when we started burning fossil fuels, when we started industrializing, when we started consumerism, that's when we are seeing a lot of these species being lost. So what scientists say is we are in the middle of what is called as 6th mass extinction. Scientists discuss, and some say yes, some say no. But just for you all to get a feel of what we are doing. At the bottom of this picture, you see that's when Earth has started, and we've crossed so many eras. So these are all the names that scientists have given us. A lot of extinctions have happened. We came in onto the Earth maybe as Homo sapiens. We have ancestors who are not Homo sapiens, like hominins and Neanderthals and so on. But Homo sapiens, broadly, I can say 10,000 years ago, right? And we, in that little time, as I've explained earlier, we are causing havoc. And so that's the reason scientists are now calling this as Anthropocene. And when I say Anthropocene, anthropo, as most of you would know, refers to human beings. That's why we have anthropology and so on. So in scientific terms, currently this is actually called Holocene, but some scientists refer to it as the Anthropocene because we are causing the sixth mass extinction. And this has started somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, is what the scientists say. So coming back to biodiversity, I keep talking about the loss that is happening. There are big 5 threats that are happening. Okay? Human beings, the way we've been using land and sea, whether it is our shipping containers roaming around and trawlers fishing away, or it is the land usage where we have urbanization expanding, we're burning up the forests, where human population is increasing. So land and sea usage is one of the biggest one. Pollution, species overexploitation, whether it is consumption of meat or overfishing. And then we have climate change, one of the reasons. And then the invasive species and diseases. So today I want to focus on climate change and why it is such a bigger threat than all the others that we've been reading up on so far. And also I just wanted to highlight, why is it that we should worry about biodiversity, right? I mean, some scientists are saying, okay, the ecosystem will get disturbed. But even for human beings, from our point of view, just remember that all our economics, all our food chains, our living on this earth is all dependent on the ecosystem around us. And we are very immune to this on a daily basis because everything is ready-made for us. We have lost our touch with from where we've come. I mean, out of Africa, millions of years ago, our ancestors would have stepped out with the hope that they get easy access to food. But that easy access to food has now become just our life around convenience, comfort, and it's very difficult to get out of it. I'm not saying that we're at fault, but we've been led up to this point because of our own ancestors, and maybe I would blame my current generation for this. But now that we are here, what does it mean when we say that there is a loss that's going to happen? Okay, so food chains can get disrupted, and tomorrow some scientists may come up with a very innovative way of popping a tablet and maybe we'll be good with more food. And there may be questions around, so what, we will manage. But we are dependent on almost every part of our life on what we call as nature and the natural systems, whether it's fuels, whether it's the materials that we use. We keep thinking we are in the midst of using just plastic, but just go back to how you started your day. Not just the food, your fossil fuels are coming from Earth. So all the natural materials and the ecosystem around us can be very easily trampled and disturbed if we don't curtail the biodiversity loss. So this is a metric just saying that 44 trillions of your economic value generation is directly tied on nature. Okay? Now, so because you want to conserve this biodiversity, you want to make sure that we don't lose it, what is it that the world is doing, right? So there are broadly 2 ways that people conserve biodiversity. When I say people, I mean scientists or citizens and everywhere across the globe. There are 2 ways that we've been looking at it so far. There is in situ conservation and there is ex situ conservation. So in situ is whatever is there, you leave it guarded. So we have national parks, our wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, conservation reserves, and so on. And interestingly, in India, we have something called as sacred groves. Okay, there is a typo there from where I picked up this information. It says groves, but sacred groves is what I'm referring to. So in the Hindu way of life, our temples always had land around the temple where the local species were conserved. So whether we call them as medicinal plants, aromatic plants, forest trees, grasses, shrubs, flowering plants, and so on. Every temple had an acre of land where this would be protected. And this was done in a very automated way where we didn't understand the significance of it, but even there not lost. So in a very natural way, our lifestyle sort of evolved around having conservation taken care of for every few kilometers. Wherever there was a temple, the local species were conserved. But unfortunately, during colonization and the era after that, we've lost interest in these, we've lost those lands. And of course, given our population, we've expanded so much into the urbanization, or whether we're using the rest of the land for agriculture, we've lost these conservation points. So there are other ways that conservation happens. It's called ex situ, which is basically you bring those plants and animals from elsewhere and keep them locked up in a different place so that it's suitable, and we continue to have access to those seed banks and gene banks. So in Norway, there is a shelter that is under the one of the bigger mountains, where we have seeds given from every country, where it's frozen and kept for future generations. Tomorrow, if there is some catastrophe, that could be the only place where we have access to the seeds. And why are seeds so important? Again, from our daily understanding and from where we get our food and what we do with the rest of the plants, we run on automated basis. Someone is producing the food, we're eating it, and we forget about it. If there are no seeds, then the next generation is not going to grow, right? And in the case of agriculture and horticulture, because it's a commercial element, someone is preserving the seeds, whether it is the companies or the farmers or people who are producing food are taking care of it. So we do not know anything about it. But imagine the rest of the species, whether it's the forest species, whether it's the grasses, something that is non-commercial. We do not have a way of conserving these seeds, and it's critical that we do so, because the technical term that is used is the germplasm. Tomorrow you want to revive any of these, that will be the only source. And so ex situ conservation sort of takes care of it, but not enough is done in the world. And now, to add to this, what is happening is wherever we had these ex situ conservation points, most of them for some reason were along the coast. Take it Florida, or even in China and Singapore, for example, the botanical gardens, they're all very close to the coast. And as the coastlines increase, and this is now already happened in US, where some of these botanical gardens are being lost because there's a continuous flooding of water and so on. So these are not enough. In the era of climate change, these are not helping. And again, just a bigger point on biodiversity conservation. So there is a habitat conservation, rare ecosystems, connectivity. When I say connectivity, what does this mean? Let's say, for example, elephants are in one particular forest and they move to another grassland and when there is rain or summer or seasonally they migrate. What we have done is we have built roads across them, we've built construction activities, we've built bridges, humans have basically intervened, and that road is cut off for them. So imagine you are not able to go to another city because the road is cut off. We talk about it every day when there is a rain, right? Imagine the animals for their food, if they have to cross and it's cut off, what happens? So these are some of the, the natural resources which need to be conserved, which we're not doing today. And what is causing this change in the biodiversity is, of course, the usage of, the land management the way we do. We also have something called as invasive species, and this is very important, which is basically you bring one species from one particular land and put it into another, it could become invasive. It overtakes the rest of the species that are there. And sometimes even neem can be an invasive species, and this is a very dangerous statement for me to make, but I'm just saying there are so many seeds of neem trees that get dropped everywhere. And if the neem tree grows, we will not cut it down because we believe it's sacred, but it also can eat up the resources that are important for the local species. Sometimes eucalyptus plays this role. So invasive species also play a huge role in loss of biodiversity, and of course pollution and our usage of the other fossil fuels. So I just want to come to the other topic, what we started off with, saying that in the era of climate change, why is biodiversity conservation even more important? So this is something that UN has put out, and we've heard about climate change, but what does it mean? In simple words, basically Earth is heating up. And the reason it's heating up has always happened, from when Earth has evolved. It's not new, but the temperature increase could be as high as 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees. And that may feel very, very small number when someone is hearing it for the first time. But let me give you an analogy. I'm sure most of you all would have stood in front of a stove, heating up or boiling milk. As long as the milk is boiling and it stays inside the vessel, you're waiting for it to finish, right? But there is a tipping point after which the milk overflows, and a lot of us run to sort of switch it off. Earth is right now somewhere close to that tipping point, and we don't know when it's going to sort of draw the analogy, overflow. But the temperature is increasing, and I'll just show you the statistics for that. Now, to look at this image, what this text says is basically we're sort of having a blanket around the Earth, which are the greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases are making sure that this heat stays within close to Earth. So earlier when the Earth was getting heated up, there was a way for this heat to sort of radiate back into space. What we are doing is we're increasing these greenhouse gases by burning fossil fuels, petrol, diesel, natural gases, oil, whatever we're burning up is releasing carbon dioxide into the space. So once this is happening, the greenhouse gases, as they're increasing, they're sort of forming up a blanket around us, and that blanket is keeping the Earth even hotter. So that's the reason we are saying that when the temperature increases for Earth, we are at that tipping point. Now, one of the scientists has put this forth. It's called climate stripes. And what they've done is from 1860 onwards till the current year, 2021, they've taken the average temperature of the Earth. And so if you see each year, you see the blue stripe, relatively, what should I say, a normal or a cooler temperature. And as we are hitting after 2010, the average temperature of Earth is increasing drastically, where you can see these red stripes. And so they've used this climate stripes, and you can actually go to the site climatestripes.info, which gives you more about this. And what you're seeing here is a screenshot of the Hyderabad city itself. On the left, you can see I've taken Asia, India, Hyderabad. And you can, when you visit this website, you can see for the entire Earth, you can see for India and so on. And the story is the same, where the temperature is increasing year on year. And we humans feel, yes, okay, once in a while we feel, okay, it's getting hotter, but then we go back into our AC rooms and everything seems fine. But these increasing temperatures are resulting in a lot of changes which we are not noticing on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is, so this is the same climate stripes, but for the entire globe. At the top, you can see that's the climate temperature. And at the bottom, this is a measurement given for biodiversity. That's the number of species that are there in the world, which are basically the count. The darker the green color is, the more species are there. And as you keep moving towards 2010, I think the years are missing here, but this is from 1970 to 2018. And to your right-hand side is 2018. And you can see the green color almost disappearing, which is basically how the species are being lost year on year as the temperature is increasing.